Hello, my loves. Today I thought we would do something a little different. Well, I guess there's not really a little different because this is only the third video, so there's not too much similar or different, but different than what we've done so far. We're just trying different stuff. But I thought we'd do a little reading today because I recently started watching The Fall of the House of Usher, which I've been meaning to get to for ages. And for those who don't know, that TV series is based on Edgar Allan Poe short stories, and each episode is titled after a different Poe story. And I thought that would be a great excuse to pull out the big old collected volume of Edgar Allan Poe works I have and do a little reading from it. I love reading aloud, and I love hearing things read aloud. So I thought it would be a fun excuse to go through some short stories while also beefing up my knowledge for the show, so I feel well informed while I'm watching. A little bit of double duty. Now, this is probably going to include, obviously, some soft-spoken, kind of whispering speech. Mic sensitivity is way up, so there will probably be some mouth sounds mixed in, and just some nice, gentle reading as we go through some slightly spooky stories. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, I hope you will stick around and listen, but if not, I understand. So, I thought we'd start with the big guns first. Get it out of the way. Do the Raven. That's the big one that everyone knows. We'll get to some more obscure ones. I mean, nothing that obscure. We're going through the big ones that the show uses, which I think are some of Poe's more famous selections. But The Raven, I think, is perhaps the best, most well-known story. Oh, this is such a heavy volume. It has some heft to get it up there. All right. The Raven. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door, "only this and nothing more." Ah, distinctly I remember, it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow. Vainly I had tried to borrow from my book surcease of sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here forevermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. Some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This is it, and nothing more." Presently, my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore, but the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came tapping at my chamber door that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more. Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the darkness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, Lenore. This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word, Lenore. Merely this, and nothing more. Then into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon I heard a tapping somewhat louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see, then, what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more." Open here I flung the shutter, when, with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not least obeisance made he, not an instant stopped or stayed he, but with the mien of a lord or lady perched above my chamber door, perched upon a bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird, beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. Though thy crest be shorn and shaven now, I said, art sure no craven, ghastly, grim, and ancient raven wandering from the nightly shore? Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore. Quoth the raven, Nevermore. Much I marvel this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no sublunary being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculptured bust above his chamber door, with such a name as Nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on the placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour, nothing farther than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, Other friends have flown before, on the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before. Quoth the raven, Nevermore. Wondering at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken, Doubtless, said I, what it utters is its only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master, whom unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster. So, when hope he would adjure, stern despair returned. Instead of the sweet hope he dared adjure, that sad answer, Nevermore. But the raven still beguiling all my sad soul into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then, upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking, Nevermore. This I sat, engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned in my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lining that the lamplight gloated o'er, but whose velvet violet lining, with lamp-line gloating o'er, she shall press, ah, nevermore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer swung by angels whose faint footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he hath sent thee respite, respite and nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. Let me quaff this kind nepenthe and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, Nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, whether tempter sent, or whether tempest tossed thee here ashore, desolate, yet all undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this horror haunted. Tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven, Nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore, tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aidenn it shall clasp a sainted maiden, who the angels name Lenore, clasp a rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels call Lenore. Quoth the raven, Nevermore. Be that our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked, upstarting. Get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. Written February 1845. What a classic piece. An absolute classic. Now, I hadn't been planning on reading Lenore, but Poe does have a poem for Lenore herself. And after reading a poem that name drops her so much, it seems a pity not to read it. Oh, and I found the page already. I didn't have it bookmarked, but I think it was calling to me. So why don't we read Lenore? It's a much shorter poem, but I think is good context to have before, I suppose before reading the Raven, but after will do as well. There we go. We heft the big old book again. Lenore. Ah, broken is the golden bowl, the spirit flown forever. Let the bell toll, a saintly soul glides down the Stygian river, and let the burial rite be read, the funeral song be sung, a dirge for the most lovely dead that ever died so young. And Guy de Vere, hast thou no tear? Weep now or nevermore. See, on yon drear and rigid bier, low lies thy love, Lenore. Yon heir, whose cheeks of pallid hue with tears are streaming wet, sees only through their crocodile dew a vacant coronet. False friends, he loved her for her wealth and hated her for her pride, and when she fell in feeble health he blessed her that she died. How shall the ritual then be read, the requiem how sung for her most wronged of all the dead that ever died so young? Peccavimus, but rave not thus, and let solemn song go up to God so mournfully that she may feel no wrong. The sweet Lenore hath gone before with young hope at her side, and thou art wild for the dear child that should have been thy bride. For her, the fair and debonair that now so lowly lies, the life still there upon her hair, the death upon her eyes. Avaunt, tonight my heart is light, no dirge will I appraise, but waft the angel on her flight with a paean of old days. Let no bell toll, lest her sweet soul, amidst its hallowed mirth, should catch that note as it doth float up from the damned earth. To friends above, from fiends below, the indignant ghost is riven, from grief and moan to a gold throne beside the King of Heaven. Written February 1843. I love seeing this one in context with the Raven, because I think it's really interesting how he has that same rhyming language. I don't know if you noticed the lines. The weep now or nevermore, see on yon drear and rigid bier, low lies thy love, Lenore. That he was rhyming nevermore with Lenore 2 years before he wrote the Raven itself. It's like this poem includes the seeds of what would later become the Raven, and also makes you think about how, this is him memorializing his own sense of loss for his beloved, and to know that didn't leave him for 2 years is a poignant thought, I think. What do you think? Should we do more? Let me see. I put another bookmark in here. What was I marking? Perfect. we're going backwards in a chronological order of writing. But I think we'll finish with The Telltale Heart. This one is a little bit longer, just like The Raven was. But this is another one that has an episode in House of Usher, and another one that is a quite famous Poe story that if you're interested on building up your Poe canon, this is a good one for you to know. The Telltale Heart. Motto: art is long and time is fleeting, and our hearts, though stout and brave, still like muffled drums are beating funeral marches to the grave. Longfellow. True, nervous, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am, but why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken, and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object there was none, passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me, he had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. He had the eye of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold, and so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it, oh, so gently. And then, when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I first put in a dark lantern, all closed, so that no light shone out, and then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening so far that I could see the old man as he lay upon his bed. Ha! Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously, oh, so cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye, and this I did for 7 long nights, every night just at midnight. But I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work, for it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning when the day broke, I went boldly into his chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone, and inquiring how he had passed the night. So you see, he would have been a very profound old man indeed to suspect that every night, just at 12, I looked in upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, my sagacity. I could hardly contain my feelings of triumph to think that there I was opening the door little by little, and the old man had not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps the old man heard me, for he moved in the bed suddenly, as if startled. Now you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was black as pitch with the thick darkness, for the shutters were close-fastened, through fear of robbers. So I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and I kept on pushing, steadily, steadily. I had got my head in, and was about to open the lantern, when my thumb slipped into the tin fastening, and the man sprang up in the bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still, and said nothing. For another hour I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime I did not hear the old man lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed, listening, just as I have done, night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. Presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew that it was the groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or of grief, oh no. It was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, when all the world slept, it has welled up from my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echo the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt, and pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise, when he had turned in the bed. His fears had been ever since growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only a mouse crossing the floor." Or, "It is merely a cricket which has made a single chirp." Yes, he has been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, but he had found all in vain, because death, in approaching the old man, had stalked with his black shadow before him, and the shadow had now reached and enveloped the victim. And it was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard me, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing the old man lie down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a single dim ray, like the thread of a spider, shot out from the crevice and fell full upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinctness, all a dull blue, with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray as if by instinct, precisely upon the damned spot. And now, have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but over-acuteness of the senses? Now I say, there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, much as the sound a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier into courage. But even yet, I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say. Louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous. So I am. And now, at the dead hour of the night, and amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable wrath. Yet for some minutes longer I refrained and kept still. But the beating grew louder. I thought the heart must burst, and now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked once only. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. Then I sat upon the bed and smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the walls. At length it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. The old man was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If still you think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. I then took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited all between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatsoever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had caught all. When I made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart, for what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled. For what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man I mentioned was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted of familiar things. But ere long I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears, but still they sat and chatted. The ringing became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained definitiveness until at length I found the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I now grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice, yet the sound increased. And what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound. much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I arose and argued about trifles in a high key and with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited to fury by the observations of the men, but the noise steadily increased. Oh, God! What could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had sat and grated it upon the boards, but the noise arose over all and continually increased. It grew louder, 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 and still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God, no, no, they heard, they suspected, they knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think. But anything better than this agony, anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. And now, again, hark, louder, 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 louder. Villains, I shrieked, dissemble no more. I admit the deed. Tear of the planks, here, here. It is the beating of his hideous heart. Written January 1843. Just the month before Lenore was written. Actually, in this volume, I think Lenore's the very next story. I suppose that one's a poem. Whew. That one was much scarier than I remember, much darker. I mean, I know most of Poe's works err on the side of darkness, but that one in particular, I think, takes you into the mentality of the killer much more. So many of his poems, I think, are largely about death, but often about mourning and about loss. And that one is, in a way, about loss, but a much more intentional one. So I hope that was not too spooky to lull you to sleep, if that is where you are going right now. At the very least, I hope that you are relaxed and maybe in the mood for more Poe. Let me know, please, if you enjoyed this, if you would like to hear more Poe stories, if you would like to hear any other classics back in ye olde public domain. I really enjoy a lot of older works. I'm a big fan of Poe. I'm also a huge fan of Shakespeare. I think it could be fun to do some Shakespeare readings as well. If you have a favorite Poe work, let me know which one in the comments. Maybe I'll read that one soon. But for now, I think I will say good night, or good day if you're getting started wherever you are in your day. I hope that you are soothed and relaxed, and I guess feel a little spooked, perhaps. I think that's the way with Poe. Thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you in another video. Rest well, my friends.